Hello YouTube. Welcome back to Paranormal Moscow. Many places in Moscow, capital of Russia, have their own secrets and mysteries. They're also called urban legends by some. For example, a place of certain worship is the house where Lavrenti Beria, head of the secret police at one time, and a very unusual Soviet statesman, conducted interrogations as well as encounters with numerous women, some abducted from Moscow streets. Sometimes you can hear screams from the basements there and see the silhouettes of ghosts. That's on Malaya Nikitskaya Street, yes. People's Commissar of Internal Affairs or Minister, Lavrenti Beria, once lived in the house number 28/1 on Malaya Nikitskaya Street, where the Tunisian embassy is now located. According to witnesses, from time to time, someone in the building strangely spoils important documentation, and at night you can hear as if the old owner is coughing and breathing somewhere nearby. Well, a significant role in the legends belongs to Beria himself, to whose apartment attractive women were often brought, and whose future fate was shrouded in obscurity, of course. In addition, there are mentions that during the renovation of the building, instruments of torture were found in the basement. At the same time, I need to add something about Lavrenti Beria, who was a very complicated personality. He most likely was the one who killed Stalin, made sure that Stalin passed away, so as not to be purged himself. And Beria actually had very interesting ideas. He did not like socialism. He didn't care for communist ideology. At the end, he might have brought brighter future to the Soviet Union, but he was eliminated by Khrushchev and his team. So that's a very macabre story in itself. Now, about his house or the building, they say that mythical things are happening not only inside the house, but also in the nearby Patriarch district. People there constantly hear the sounds of slamming doors, human footsteps, and the noise of a automobile engine starting. And it seems to witnesses that all this is done by the ghost of Beria himself. And in the botanical garden on the night of June 22nd to 23rd, a translucent girl in a wreath of red poppies wanders about. On the embankment of Yauza, the footsteps of cavalry can be heard on an autumn night. And in the Izmailovsky Park, the ghost of the oldest tram was sometimes observed. Of course, these stories are often embellished, but personally I believe that not all of them are fictional, and there is evidence to that. Now, at about 22 hours 40 minutes on March the 13th of the year 1970, a black dog was spotted by Moscow police officers. Moreover, they claimed that it was translucent, and through it you could see walls and sculptures. And after running along the platform, it literally dissolved. Rumors about the incident reached Leonid Brezhnev, who was the Soviet leader at the time. Now, it is believed that from 1970 to 1974, two groups of the KGB and the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the USSR were on duty at the Revolution Square station at night. During this time, there was one incident. On September 28, 1972, during the night shift, a silhouette of a black dog was seen on the station pavilion. It stared with colorless eyes and growled, and then rushed towards the group of men. The Interior Ministry officers opened fire, but the ghost disappeared, and bullets began to ricochet off the floor and walls. The story was hushed up, but the presence of a ghost remained an important issue. The ghost of a black dog was seen several times at the Revolution Square subway station. In 1980, two men fell onto the tracks, allegedly dodging a black dog rushing at them. They were safely rescued, but the precedent was extremely dangerous. So, under personal instructions of Brezhnev, a prayer service and a purification ceremony was held at the Revolution Square station, which is highly unusual in the atheistic state, but apparently information leaked out. It seemed that it helped, but in 1994, the history repeated itself, but now in the modern Russian state. At the rush hour, a dog ran through the crowd. Because of the density of the flow, those standing on the platform did not notice anything. However, those who were at a distance, they saw a sinister black ghost passing through people. Paradoxically, no one saw the dog under surveillance cameras. It is impossible to remove a silhouette or a shadow, even with modern cameras. In 2008, a 44-year-old employee of the subway or metro, as we say in Russian, when walking on the stretch between the stations Revolution Square and Kursk, heard a dog howling. His words were confirmed by other employees of the Moscow Metro who worked on the Arbatsko-Pokrovskaya line. Could this phenomenon be a mass hallucination? Well, in 2022, a man fell on the rails. Judging by the surveillance cameras, it was as he was trying to dodge something. Eyewitnesses and the victim himself said that they saw a dark dog accelerate and jump on the man. Already in flight, the dog literally disappeared into thin air. However, nothing like this was seen on the videotape, although there are more than a dozen witnesses to the incident. Whose ghost lives at the Revolution Square station, and why it appears there is still a big question. Unfortunately, the security cameras do not record any movement during the dog's appearance. You can only see or notice the mysterious black dog with the human eyes. Is this story just an urban legend and a wild imagination? I don't think so. Still, there is a lot of evidence, for this to be just a simple tale. And now, let's look at the object whose existence is beyond any doubt. The Moscow Kremlin cannot but attract increased attention to itself. It is the largest surviving and active fortress in Europe. And like any fortress, the Kremlin keeps its secrets. People lived on the Borovitsky Hill, where the Kremlin was later built, long before the foundation of Moscow. Archaeologists have found on the territory of the Kremlin camps of people who lived here in the Bronze Age. That is like 2nd millennium BC. Those camps from the Iron Age were also found near the Archangel Cathedral, which may indicate that this place did not cease to be the center of life for a long time. The Vyatichi tribe, who settled here in the 10th century, obviously did not come to an empty place. Here, in a conveniently located place at the intersection of two rivers, the Moscow and the Neglina, there were basically remains of camps, of tribal camps and ritual structures. It is characteristic that in the pagan period, Borovitsky Hill was called Witch Mountain, where there was a temple in that territory. It was on the site of the temple that the first Kremlin was laid. So you may want to draw some conclusions if you want to. Borovitsky Hill was an ideal site for the construction of a border fortification, since both water and land routes converged here. Land roads led towards Novgorod and Kiev, great cities from the past of the land. In addition to the Kremlin, which is visible to everyone, there's another Kremlin. It's underground. A lot of researchers were engaged in the system of cache and secret passages in the Kremlin area. They're obviously looking for things. According to the research of the famous Russian archaeologist and investigator of underground Moscow, Ignatius Teletsky, underground structures under the buildings of the 16th, 17th centuries located within the Sadovое Кольцо, or the garden ring, are connected to each other and to the Kremlin by a network of underground labyrinths. Moreover, initially the plan of the underground capital was created by the Italian architects of the Moscow Kremlin, Aristotle Fioravanti, Pietro Antonio Solari, and Alevis Novi. Stiletsky in particular wrote down this: all three architects, as foreigners, could not leave Moscow and had to lay their bones in it. Well, it tells you their fate. The archaeologists discovered a well-coordinated system of 350 underground points, thanks to which, for example, it was possible to get from the Kremlin even to the Vorobyovy Gory. According to the ideas of most people, the main tower of the Moscow Kremlin is Spasskaya Bashня, or tower. But is it so? It is logical to assume that the priority should belong to the tower that was built first. The first of the towers of the modern Kremlin was Tainiska, founded in 1485. For the first time in Russia, brick was used for fortress construction. This tower got its name from the secret passage going from the tower to the Moscow River. Taina means secret in Russian. For a long time, Tainitska Tower was of great importance to Muscovites. On the feast of the Epiphany, there was a special hole, or Jordan, was cut in front of it in the Moscow River. The royal entrance to the area was one of the most solemn ceremonies. Until 1674, there was a striking clock on the Tainitskaya Tower. It was from here that the bells were rung in case of fire. Until 1917, a cannon was fired from the Tainitskaya Tower every day at noon. Why did the Tainitskaya Tower become the first one? This is due to the fact that the tower became central to the southern wall of the Kremlin. That is, it faced Jerusalem. Because of this, Jordan, or the ice hole used for water consecration on Epiphany Day, was cut in front of it. It is well known that the Italians built the Kremlin, so their names are also well known. I already mentioned one of them, Pietro Antonio Solari. He came from a family of architects who worked in Milan with Leonardo da Vinci, and Antonio himself worked with the great da Vinci. Some historians, comparing historical evidence, do not even exclude that Leonardo personally participated in the construction of the Kremlin. So this is very interesting, because it means that Leonardo was able to leave Russia. The historian Oleg Ulyanov, who has been studying the history of the Kremlin all his life, he was the first one to put forward this hypothesis in the late 1980s. There is no direct evidence of this hypothesis, but more and more indirect ones are being found, starting with the almost exact correspondence in the drawings of the Florentine with rare elements of the Kremlin walls, and also to the so-called white spots, or missing information, I guess, in the biography of Da Vinci in the period from 1499 to 1502. Even Dmitry Likhachev, a well-known personality in Russia, showed great interest in the hypothesis of Leonardo's hand at the time. Now this, few people know, but for a long time, real so-called hanging gardens were located on the territory of the Moscow Kremlin. Already in the 17th century, there were two large and several small or indoor upper gardens on the roofs and terraces of palaces. Do you see how forward-looking Russia's leaders were at the time, and all the sustainability and ecology and everything else, they practiced it. According to Tatiana Rodionova, an employee of the Moscow Kremlin Museum, hanging gardens were located on the roof of the now defunct Embankment chambers on an area of 2.2 thousand square meters. Not only fruits and nuts were grown here, but also a pond with a mirror area of 200 square meters was arranged. In this place, the young Peter the Great, future Russian emperor, received his first sailing skills. Since that time, even the names of those who were responsible for the garden structure have been preserved: Stepan Mushakov, Ivan Teletevsky, and Nazar Ivanov. The water for the hanging gardens came from the Vodovzvodnaya Tower, where a mechanism was set up to lift water from the Moskva River. From the well installed in the tower, water was supplied to lead pipes to the Kremlin itself. Well, lead pipes is not really anything that creates better human conditions and longevity, but this was technology of the time. Now, about the Kremlin itself. The Kremlin was originally red, but in the 18th century it was whitewashed according to the fashion of that time. Napoleon also saw the structure as white. The French playwright Jacques-François Ancelot was in Moscow in 1826. In his memoirs, he described the Kremlin as follows: "The white paint that hides the cracks gives the Kremlin the appearance of youth, which does not correspond to its shape and crosses out its past. The Kremlin was whitewashed for the holidays. The rest of the time it was, as they like to say, covered with a noble patina." An interesting metamorphosis happened to the Kremlin during the Great Patriotic War, or World War II. In the summer of 1941, the commandant of the Kremlin, Major General Nikolai Spiridonov, proposed to repaint all the walls and towers of the Kremlin for camouflage. It was decided and it was done. Academician Boris Iofan undertook the execution of the project. Artificial streets were built on red square walls of houses, and black holes of windows were painted on the Kremlin walls. The mausoleum turned into a natural house with a gable roof, so they were able to conceal it from the enemy eyes. The Kremlin turned red again after the war in 1947. The decision was made personally by Joseph Stalin. In principle, it was logical. Red flag, red walls, red square. And now, let's embark to the dungeons of Moscow. See, Moscow is a city, an ancient capital that keeps secrets that hide somewhat huge world from us, wherever it may be located. So, let's look at the underground part of it. Among the most famous metropolitan dungeons, Metro 2, the library of Tsar Ivan IV, the one that the British intelligence murdered, and the Neglinka, clad in stone banks, are most often described as such, as being the famous and secretive dungeons. Much of this I have described in my previous videos, but they can safely include underground utilities of an apartment building on Solyanka. How are they arranged? In the 16th century, at the intersection of the street from Varvara Gate to the Ivanovo Monastery and Bolshaya Street to the Yauza Gate, a successful merchant by the name of Nikitnikov created a salt fish yard. In this place, both ordinary salt and its variety, potassium carbonate, were sold and stored. Salted fish was also traded here. The basis of the architectural complex was a large courtyard which was surrounded by shops and barns. Two gates led inside, small and main. The latter were marked by a tower with a guardhouse. To prevent theft, no street windows were made at the ground floor level, and separate entrances led to the retail premises because you cannot trust human nature, right? The storage rooms had vaults supported by massive pillars. It can be assumed that they had a basement floor comparable in size to the above ground. Only after a while the neighboring streets received their names. Bolshoi Ivanovsky Lane, since 1961, for those who want to know, Zabelina Street, and Solyanka. In 1912, the decaying commercial premises began to be gradually dismantled in order to erect an apartment building. During the excavation of the pit, a treasure was discovered, about 500 million coins with a total weight of about 200 weight, 13 pounds, rested in the found jugs. All of them belong to the second half of the 16th century, early 17th century, where Ivan the Terrible, his son Fyodor Ivanovich, and Boris Godunov ruled. This was the beginning of the times of trouble in Russia. And many people, expecting the worst, would place their savings, gold, silver, and so forth, coins, into the soil. So there are a lot of discoveries. The valuable find was most likely turned out to be the proceeds of the salt yard, safely hidden and forgotten during the years of the turmoil period of the Russian history. This money did not make their owners happy. During the division of the treasure, one of the contractors was wounded. The policeman who arrived at the scene sees only a small fraction of the treasure, only 7 kilograms of coins, about 9,000 pieces, which were returned back after examination by the Archaeological Commission. To ensure the possibility of construction, the Moscow Merchant Company acquired an irregular-shaped plot from many owners and organized a competition for the best development of the project. As a result, several architects turned out to be the winners: Sherwood, Sergeyev, and Herman. Their work most fully met the needs of developers. The structure grew in size and the site was used to the maximum. The neoclassical building began to be decorated with stucco molding, however, unsuccessfully opening onto closed courtyards. Wells and rooms appeared inside, but its main feature is located in a place inaccessible from outside eye. We're talking about a wide basement with a large number of rooms, high vaults, and spacious corridors where two cars can easily separate from each other. At one time, the Modernics group made a wonderful mock-up of one of the buildings together with a basement room on a scale 1 to 100. Who ordered this layout and where it is stored at the moment, it is not known for certain, but the available photos allow us to imagine the huge size of the basement of the house. If you look at the photo of the layout for a long time, you still could not understand why these huge underground labyrinths were built and how it was done. Given that the basements are not very deep, most likely a pit was dug first and then a brick structure was erected. After that, the floors were installed and then they were buried back, taking out the excess soil. But could this have happened in the 16th century? How, if even today the scale of construction is impressive? Well, that's what I think about it. Previously, the above-ground part of the city was located here. Probably there were other floors above these buildings, which were destroyed by a powerful flood, the consequences of which were depicted, by the way, by Giovanni Piranesi. The part of the buildings that remained untouched by water turned out to be a good foundation for new structures, and these floors have turned into dungeon. After a while, they were cleared of junk and began to be used as storage facilities. The underground part itself is very similar to medieval quarters, where residential premises and narrow streets are habitually adjacent. Again, there have to be a lot of treasures buried in such locations in Moscow. Let's talk about one of them. In a way, it's a treasury of spirit too. It is likely that the legendary library of Ivan the Terrible, again, the Russian king, reportedly eliminated by the British intelligence at the time. And I have a very interesting video about it. Don't miss it. Anyway, that legendary library disappeared because of the flood. It may be lying in some littered place and waiting to be discovered. And reportedly, it contains great treasures. I will put forward my own hypothesis. It is quite possible that there may be similar large-scale dungeons in the Russian capital. Otherwise, how to explain the appearance of such a great structure? Ivan the Terrible is considered the owner of a unique library, which consisted of 800 valuable and rare books by ancient and Roman authors. According to legend, the library disappeared in those troubled times, or the times of turmoil, having survived several fires that occurred in Moscow through the centuries. It is assumed that rare books may be in the Kolomenskoye, in Pashkov's house, or in the Kremlin caches. Some say there may be books going back to the Great Library of Alexandria. Who knows? But it is what you can even call a state secret. And we don't know about continuous search for the library, although I did mention in my previous videos a few interesting bits of information from Moscow. So let's look more at the dungeons of the Russian capital. We wish we knew much more, because it is a very complicated place in global history, and it still continues to be so. Look, this is the location of the basement relative to the landscape above it. For example, another place in Moscow, it occupies the entire area under the entire architectural ensemble, including the buildings, the courtyard, and the passage. During the years of the Soviet power, that building turned out to be under the command of the People's Commissariat or Ministry of Railways. During the Brezhnev stagnation period, 1970s to early 1980s, there was a garage for police cars in the basement, but nothing good came of this venture, since due to high humidity, the equipment often failed. Later, during the years of Gorbachev's perestroika, garages were handed over to local residents, and in the dashing 1990s, criminal dealers found refuge here, and they arranged in historical buildings, and now the stolen cars were also located there. In 2002, two Tigeri, that's a special group in Russia who basically investigate for their own purposes underground locations throughout Russia. They find treasures, they look for strange creatures, and they find quite a lot of interesting things, and you can see it in my videos too. Well, the two Tigeri made an approximate diagram of underground rooms. In comparison with the plan, it is clearly noticeable that they managed to describe only a small fraction of the basement areas. But, you know, the zeal of the young people deserves approval. One of the legends of Moscow says that Nikolai Igumnov is a famous Russian industrialist who lived with his mistress on Bolshaya Yakimenko. Once the woman was caught by him in treason, that she wasn't let's just say loyal to him. She was killed and she was immured in a wall. The residents of the mansion claimed later that they had repeatedly observed the appearance of the ghost of a certain lady in white clothes. Another mystical story is associated with the same house. Allegedly, Igumnov lined the floors with gold coins in one of the rooms to surprise his guests, but after that he was expelled from Moscow. The reason was that each of the coins depicted the Tsar, and visitors willy-nilly had to step on the Tsar's profile when they stepped on the coins. Now, let's go to Bolshaya Ordinskaya Street. There is an interesting legend according to which on Bolshaya Ordinka, as we say, at house number 53, people see a ghostly flock of cats. And that's a bad sign. It's a sign indicating failure, according to locals. Allegedly, the cats began to appear in that area after they were released into the wild by a disgruntled neighbor of a woman who built special houses for the cats on her plot. Since then, the cat company has been wandering the streets in constant search for its home. Now, about a very strange building, the house on the embankment of... It's called the House on the Embankment. In 1918, 1 year after the communist takeover, the capital was moved from St. Petersburg to Moscow, and there was a problem with the resettlement of a large number of civil servants. As a result, it was decided to build a separate building designed for representatives of the political elite, or as they like to call themselves, servants of the people. The construction of the building lasted more than 3 years, and as a result, a huge gloomy structure was erected on the banks of the Moskva River. The history of the place where this building is located is also noteworthy. Initially, this area was completely swamped. Then economic storage facilities were built here, and later a place for executions. There is an opinion that at one time there was a house nearby in which Maluta Skuratov himself lived, the henchman of Ivan the Terrible and the head of the first Russian secret police agency. Senior Communist Party officials, members of the government, scientists, writers, and other high-ranking officials settled in the new building. At the time, the 12-story building, which had 24 entrances and more than 500 apartments, was one of the largest residential buildings in Europe. Stalin, Zhukov, Stakhanov, Khrushchev, Voroshilov, and other prominent Soviet personalities lived in the house on the Embankment. The complex provided all the necessary services: a post office, a telegraph station, a gym, a savings bank, a clinic, shops, and a canteen in which service was provided only by special coupons. When moving into the building, there was no need to bring anything of your own, neither furniture, nor dishes, nor furnishings. All this was transferred to the new tenants along with the keys. Notoriety began to spread about this place when Stalin's repressions and purges began, and about a third of the residents of the house on the Embankment were purged and executed. The walls of the building themselves were saturated with panic terror, which could not but impact the people living in it. Some were unable to withstand the pressure of the psychological press, so to say, or pressing on them, and committed suicide. Family members of the Communist Party elite, wives and children under the age of majority, meaning still teenagers and younger, were often arrested. Yes, this was the Soviet history, and they paid with their lives or freedom for alleged crimes of their fathers and mothers. Since then, ghosts have often appeared in the house on the Embankment. Residents were haunted by visions and obsessions. Some went insane. Today, the house on the Embankment is a historical monument and is among the objects protected by the Russian state. The shroud of mysticism that involved this building does not dissipate. The building still has a bad reputation in Moscow. In the future, I'll tell you more about unusual pages of Russian history, of course, with a paranormal twist, because this is what my channel is largely about. I thank you for your attention to my work. If you can support my research, you'll find the links on how to do it in the description to this video. Please subscribe and tell others.